In today's video, we are going to be predicting the Cincinnati Bengals 2025 NFL season and why I think they are still threats in the AFC. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. So the way the video is going to work is I'm going to begin by talking about what happened in 2024, then talking about what they've done so far this offseason, and then at the end of the video, we'll go through week by week of their schedule and I'll give you guys a breakdown as to how many games they should win and what their ceiling and what their floor is. With that said, let's go and hop into what happened in 2024. So as we all know, the Cincinnati Bengals finished the season off with a 9-8 record, a lot of highs, but also a lot of lows. They started off the season 0-3, and by week 13, they were a 4-8 roster, but down the stretch, they were able to win 5 straight games to ultimately finish the season 9-8. Joe Burrow was one of the best players, if not the best player in the entirety of the NFL last year. Fully healthy, had a fantastic season. On the year, 4,918 passing yards, 43 touchdowns, and 9 picks. And if this team somehow made the playoffs, I do think Joe Burrow would have probably ended up winning MVP. Of course, that did not happen, though. The defense was so bad for this team last year. Statistically speaking, they ranked 25th in opponents' points per game, 25th in opponents' yards per game, and 28th in opponents' touchdowns per game. Putrid in the red zone, really bad on third down. Poor against the run and poor against the pass. When you compare that to their offense, the offense was really solid. 27.8 points per game, 365.5 yards per game, and 3.4 touchdowns per game. We'll say they did not run the ball effectively. I don't really know if that was their fault or if that was just kind of what ended up happening because of how bad the defense was. Regardless, though, 2024 was a complete disaster for the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that came into last year with a lot of expectations to get back into the playoffs and see if they could be competitive with the likes of the Ravens, the Bills, and even, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs. Ultimately, this defense last year just did not hold up their end of the bargain. It was a putrid performance from them last year, and there was multiple games where the offense would put over 25 points on the board, but the defense would give up even more so. For example, weeks 10 through 13, they gave up 35 to Baltimore, 34 to the Chargers, 44 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It felt like any time this defense went up against a capable opponent, the defense completely floundered. They gave up 26 to Kansas City, 38 to Washington, 41 to Baltimore, 37 to Philadelphia. As I mentioned, 35 Baltimore, 34 LA, 44 Pittsburgh. Even down the stretch, they gave up 27 to Tennessee and 20 to a Cooper Rush-led Dallas Cowboys team. This defense was simply not good enough. They just fired the defensive coordinator. They bring somebody new in. They also got a couple new pieces, which let's go ahead and now talk about. So in the 2025 NFL offseason, they made a couple of moves, but admittedly speaking, this to me is just not enough. TJ Slayton on a 2-year deal, Oren Burks on a 2-year deal, Lucas Patrick. They also re-signed a bunch of key players, mainly a guy like BJ Hill and Mike Gesicki. They also handed out some extensions to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they released Alex Kappa. Now, one thing they have yet to do up to this point is re-sign Trey Hendrickson. I don't know what's going on with that. We'll also have to have the conversation about Shamar Stewart. It does feel like the Cincinnati Bengals are just kind of being hard asses on this whole thing. They feel very stubborn. They don't feel very flexible with the players. And I gotta imagine that this is really hurting the chemistry of not only the guys on the roster, but of course the main guys who are looking for contracts. I gotta be honest with you, if I was a player on this team not named Burrow, Chase, or Higgins, or any of those massive guys, I would be quite frankly a little bit concerned about staying on this roster long term, because I don't want to enter into a situation like Trey Hendrickson is in, where I have a breakout year and I want to get paid and get my services to get the most money I can, and then all of a sudden they're lowballing me and giving me the runaround to not get bigger contracts. And then when I go for a trade offer, they don't want to trade me. So I don't know. I feel like the whole thing with Trey Hendrickson is very bizarre. I feel like they have to get that thing settled out way before training camp starts, but we'll just wait and see. In terms of the players they did bring in, TJ Slayton, he's an okay player last year for Green Bay. 427 total snaps, 45.0 run defense grade with a 57.6 pass rush grade, 1 sack, and 19 solo tackles. His best year was probably in 2023. He played 627 snaps then, 61.9 run defense grade, 61.3 pass rush grade, 38 solo tackles with 11 assisted tackles. So this is somebody who's not going to get to the quarterback at a consistent threat. He's also, I guess, an okay run defender. To put him opposite of what you already have in BJ Hill, I do think it'll end up being a pretty worthwhile signing. It's not a massive deal, 2 years, $15 million. He's also a young player that could still maybe get better in a new system. So Fingers crossed that does happen, but I'm not like holding my breath or anything. Oren Burks does present an interesting body. Last year, he had a total of 147 snaps, but in those snaps, 70.0 coverage grade, 86.8 run defense grade, and a pass rush grade of 63.2. In 2023, again, similar stuff here, 326 total snaps, 73.0 coverage grade with a 66.8 run defense grade. The thing for Oren is he just hasn't really played a lot of starting snaps. He's 30 years old and has never been a full-time starter on any team that he's been on, which, by the way, he's been on a lot of different teams: Green Bay, San Francisco, and Philadelphia. Now he's entering a situation in Cincinnati where I kind of believe he's going to be the starting linebacker, probably opposite of Logan Wilson. So it's going to be interesting to see if this one does end up working out. It is only a 2-year, $5 million deal for a potential starting linebacker, so I'll give it a thumbs up. I like that signing, to be honest with you. The Lucas Patrick one, he's an experienced offensive lineman. He gave up 0 sacks last year on just a little bit over 550 snaps, 6 penalties in that time, 66.3 run blocking grade, and for the most part, his numbers are okay. Definitely not mind-blowing or anything like that. I would say he's probably a little bit more inconsistent than what you would like, but again, this is an interior offensive line that, frankly, is not very good, so if you can get a guy like Lucas Patrick to come in there, get you some snaps here and there, maybe it could be a bit of an upgrade. But outside of those moves, really nothing was done to make me feel great about this team. I do like the fact that they secured Jamar Chase into a big deal and T. Higgins to a big deal. I think both those contracts were pretty fair. Obviously, the T. Higgins one is going to be a bit more controversial because he's clearly the worst receiver than a guy like Jamar Chase. But one healthy T. Higgins is fantastic, and that offense is super dynamic, and you're going to bank on that offense to win you a lot of games. So you want to make sure that you keep all your engines in motion, and I think keeping T. Higgins ultimately was a wise move. I don't know if I would have done it. I think I would have probably not brought him back and focused on fixing my defense. But if you want to win games, you got to have an awesome offense. And I think that's kind of what Cincinnati's thinking. Outside of that, though, I got to be honest with you, I feel like it was a pretty lackluster free agency class. I know they did not have money, but I just feel like there were so many things they could have done better this offseason and handled a lot of different situations quite better, like Shamar Stewart, like Trey Hendrickson, and honestly, the Jamar Chase and T. Higgins thing was kind of weird too. I don't really feel like they handled any of that very well. I'll give them some flowers. I thought their 3 free agent signings were solid pickups, but I don't feel really great about this roster. Again, I don't really know how much money they were really dealing with. I don't think it was enough to have a crazy offseason, but I would have liked to have seen like 1 or 2 really big, impactful guys to add to that defense. For now, we'll wait and see what those guys can do. Next, let's go ahead and look at the 2025 NFL Draft, where in round 1, they took Shamar Stewart, round 2, Demetrius Knight, round 3, Dylan Fairchild, round 4, Barrett Carter, round 5, Jalen Rivers, and round 6, Taj Brooks. Now, I'm actually kind of a bit of a fan of this draft class. While I did not love their free agency class, I actually don't mind what they did here in free agency. Let's have the conversation about Shamar Stewart. We'll talk about the contract situation first, and then we'll talk about the actual prospect that he is. For starters, I do think at some point there will be a deal done between Shamar and Cincinnati. I think it will be a situation where Shamar is going to stand his ground, as he should, by the way, and Cincinnati is just going to have to get rid of that one little clause that they are holding on to dear life for. I also, just like the Trey Hendrickson situation, think it's a little bit ridiculous. You are bringing in a young player, a first-round pick, and you're treating him like this. I think this probably does, I don't want to say irreversible damage to those two's chemistry, of course, between Shamar Stewart and the organization. But if I'm Shamar Stewart after this, I'm not playing through injury, at least over the next couple years, until this team proves some sort of loyalty towards me. Hopefully things could be amended at some point, but I don't think they frankly will. And I wouldn't be shocked if Shamar Stewart at some point within the next couple years probably goes to another team because of this situation. Hopefully, though, that's not the case. I hope that this thing ultimately does work out. In terms of the player that Shamar Stewart is, he was the buzz and a lot of talk of the draft cycle. Massive individual with elite upside, but a very raw prospect. Isn't a finisher of plays. He can get to it. He can make plays in the backfield. He can make some stops. He can get to the quarterback, but he just has to finish plays. You know, you pair him opposite of Trey Hendrickson. I do worry about him being an immediate impactful guy day 1, but I think by year 2 or year 3, you're looking at somebody that could present a really interesting and talented player to play opposite, assuming Trey Hendrickson is on this team for the foreseeable future. I do think he has very elite upside. He is a bit of a wild card, though. You just don't really know what you're going to get from him because while he has the size, the athleticism, some of the twitchiness that you would like to see, there are some NFL IQ things that you worry about with him, some small little nuanced things that have to be fleshed out. and I do kind of worry that he may never be able to do so. We'll have to wait and see, though. I also think, frankly, him not being at camp right now and, the past few months at this stage is very disappointing, because I think he really could use those reps. And right now, all he's doing is just mental reps, which is good enough, but would be nice to see him put some pads on, get some, nuance coached into him, and unfortunately, that's just not happening right now. With the round 2 pick, Demetrius Knight. Now, Demetrius Knight is, I believe, also going through a contract situation, or at least was. I'm not going to talk specifically about that because I already made my case with Shamar Stewart. In terms of the player that Demetrius Knight is, he's an older prospect, a 6-year guy, but I think there's a lot of things I like about his game. This is a Bengals team that's trying to win championships and win playoff games now. So getting a guy who is a little bit of an older prospect, I think makes a lot of sense. He's a solidly built linebacker that maybe lacks some explosiveness and some over athleticism. And I think in coverage, especially within man, I do kind of worry about him, but I think he's solid at plugging in holes. He can get some tackles for loss. And for a defense that really needed help within their front seven, I do like these 2 pickups, assuming that both of them are actually on the team by week 1. With their 3rd round pick, they took Dylan Fairchild, the Georgia guard. Now, he's a solid guy, and I think that he's going to need a bit of development. I do think right now he's going to struggle in run blocking, especially against NFL interior defensive linemen. But as a pass protector, I think he'll be totally solid. This is an offense that wants to throw the football. You have Chase, you have Higgins, you have Joe Burrow, you have Gesicki. You're going to want to throw the football probably more than you're going to want to run the football. I still think balance is needed, but get a guy like Dylan Fairchild, I do think he will potentially be an upgrade in that interior, especially as a pass blocker. If you can put somebody next to him who can help him in double teams and really help him kind of develop as a run blocker, this pick could end up actually working out. So if we assume that all 3 of these guys are playing for this team, which I hope they will, I think so far they're 3 for 3, and I like all the moves they've made. Their 4th round pick in Barrett Carter, again, another depth option within the linebacking core. He's long. I think he's rangy. I think he's a solid athlete. I do worry a little bit about some of the angles and pursuit stuff he finishes with. Sometimes he can miss a tackle just simply because he takes a wrong angle, or sometimes he could be a little bit out of control. But I do think he has solid enough instincts to get the job done. And if you're telling me in the future, once Logan Wilson gets passed up on because he's a little bit older now, being a 29-year-old player, not too sure how much longer he has still in him, but now you're telling me you have Barrett Carter on one side and then Demetrius Knight on the other side, I actually think that could be a nice linebacking duo to kind of build around. In round 5, Jalen Rivers, probably developmental swing tackle that you're hoping can develop to be something nice. And then Taj Brook in round 6. He lacks some explosiveness, but he was very productive for Texas Tech, and I think you put him opposite of what you have in Chase Brown. I actually think he could be a pretty solid addition for this team. So all in all, for me, I think they're 6 for 6 in this draft class. I'm not sure if like every single one of these guys will work out fully, but if Shamar Stewart pans out, he's kind of the flip of the coin. If he becomes an awesome player, this draft class gets a double thumbs up. If he ends up being a bit of a wasted pick because he can't develop, then you get 2 thumbs down. It all just kind of depends on Shamar Stewart. But adding 2 linebackers in Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, who I think both could be impactful guys really early, I love that. Adding an offensive guard in Dylan Fairchild, I think is a solid pickup. Jalen Rivers in round 5 could be a nice little swing tackle. And I think Taj Brooks could actually end up being an impactful guy at some points. My only complaint is that because of how lackluster their free agency class was, they had so many holes to fix in the draft class. And I don't think they addressed all their holes. Like, I think they still need help in the secondary. I still think they need help on the defensive line, even though they took Shamar Stewart. The offensive line still needs a lot of work. And I think maybe a nice little extra running back in there would have been cool too. I think given the fact that they just took, I think, some really solid picks, I can't be too mad about this one. So I'll give it a thumbs up for now, with the flip of the coin being Shamar Stewart. Now, really quickly, before we hop into their schedule, I just briefly want to cover their depth chart and kind of talk about what I think is good and what I think is bad. Let's start off with the weapons for Joe Burrow. Obviously, Joe Burrow at quarterback. At running back, you do have Chase Brown, you do have Zach Moss, you do have Taj Brook and Samaje Perine. I think this unit should be totally fine. I think they'll get the job done. Chase Brown had a nice year last year, so I think that I feel good enough about this group. Maybe if it doesn't work out, you focus on getting another running back next year. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, you still have Jermaine Burton. I don't really know what's going on there. Of course, Andre Rivas. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I like your starting 3. I do worry a little bit about your depth options, but with those starting 3, you're going to rely heavily on them. I think Jamar Chase will be in the running for Offensive Player of the Year yet again. In fact, I kind of think he's the favorite to win it because I think this will be a very heavy passing attack team. Mike Gesicki at tight end, Drew Sample and Eric All Jr. behind him, not to mention Tanner Hudson. Solid tight end room. Think they get the job done. You can do a lot of different things with them. Your offensive line, you have Orlando Brown Jr., Cordell Volson, Dylan Fairchild behind him, Ted Karras, Cody Ford, Lucas Patrick also there as well, and Amarius Mims. It's a weird offensive line because there's things to like about it, but there's a lot of things that I don't like about it. Amarius Mims last year I thought showed glimpses of who he truly can become. I think long-term, you have a pretty nice starting right tackle for the foreseeable future. Orlando Brown Jr. last year wasn't his greatest year, especially as a run blocker, but he's been a pretty solid pass protector for most of his career, so I feel pretty solid about that. You did add 2 new pieces to your interior offensive line in Dylan Fairchild and Lucas Patrick, so it's kind of still up in the air to see how this offensive line will end up looking like in the interior, but I at least think it's probably better than what it was last year. Then on the defensive end, I do think your front 7 is better than what it was last year, but I still think it needs some work. I actually do like their linebacking room now, assuming that Demetrius Knight plays for them, because you have Demetrius Knight, you have Logan Wilson, you have Barrett Carter, you also have Oren Burks. I think that unit could be actually kind of fun next year. In terms of the defensive line, there's a ton of young talent here, but none of them have really panned out quite yet. For example, McKinley Jackson, Miles Murphy, Chris Jenkins, even a guy like TJ Slayton hasn't fully worked out. I'm going to assume that Shamar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson get contracts at some point. So I look at this defensive line. I think it can be solid. I think there's some talent here to get after the quarterback and stuff the run. But they're going to need some of these young guys to really step up. It's kind of a make or break year for Miles Murphy as well. Former first round pick. He has to get the job done. So you do have Joseph Osai still in the building. So I think the defensive line and front 7 in general is better than what it was last year. But I think it still needs improvement from some of these young guys. When it comes to the secondary, I think there's things to like. It's actually a fairly young unit. I do think the safeties were really bad last year. Hopefully Geno Stone can return to form because he was so good for Baltimore the year prior. And last year, he was kind of a disaster for this team. Jordan Battle, also statistically speaking, wasn't that great either. Your young secondary, though, DJ Turner, I think is a third-year guy now. Josh Newton had a fine season last year. Cam Taylor-Britt, a little bit older, but still fairly young. Dax Hill is also fairly young, too. I do think they're missing that true number 1 corner, but I at least think they have a number of young options in the cornerback room that have some experience and maybe could get a little bit better. I still worry about the safeties. Hopefully they can, play a little bit better next year. In totality, I look at this defense. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. I think the new defensive coordinator can do a better job. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. I still think there's a lot of things that have to get fixed on this roster. But with all that said, let's go ahead and look at their schedule. And I don't think it's the hardest schedule in the world, but there are some tough matchups, especially later in the season. We start off in week 1 versus the Cleveland Browns, and I'm just going to go ahead and fix in week 2 as well. Cleveland and then Jacksonville. I think those will be 2 wins for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Jacksonville game is definitely not a give-me game. I think the Jacksonville offense can be really good, but I think there'll be some figuring out they have to do defensively, and I do think Cincinnati could take advantage. In week 3 versus Minnesota, to me, this is kind of a coin flip because I just don't really know what J.J. McCarthy is going to be. I'm actually going to go ahead and give the win here to Cincinnati. They know who they are, and if they're just a little bit better defensively, I think this one could be a fun sort of shootout style matchup. And I think by the end of season, Minnesota would be a better team, but I think early on, Minnesota will have to figure things out. Week 4 versus Denver, I think Denver's the best defense in the NFL. I think they'll be able to stifle this Bengals offense enough to allow Bo Nix to win this game. So give me the Denver Broncos in week 4. The Detroit Lions in week 5. Lions are a weird team, but I'm also going to go ahead and give the Lions a win here. Just a bit more talented unit overall, and I just trust their coaching staff to get the job done, even if they have a new OC in DC. That puts them 3-2, 5 weeks into the season. In week 6, you have the Green Bay Packers. Another tough matchup, 2 potentially very potent offenses with some defensive question marks. I'm actually going to give the win here to Cincinnati. I just think Joe Burrow is going to absolutely torch this Green Bay secondary that is just not very good at all. Jamar Chase should have a massive game in week 6. So at this stage, you're 4-2 with 3 weeks left to go before the bye week. You have the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 7. I think Pittsburgh's a good team. I do think that they will likely split Pittsburgh. I think they'll win this one, but I will probably assume they're going to lose the next one. Versus the New York Jets, I'm also going to give the win here to Cincinnati. I think they're just a better offense, and New York has a lot of question marks still to answer. And then versus Chicago, I'm going to give the Chicago Bears the win here. I really do believe in that defense, and I think Caleb Williams in that offense will be around this time starting to really get going. swing. So at this stage of the season, I have them down for 3 losses versus Denver, Detroit, and then the Chicago Bears, which will put them at a record of 6-3 heading into their bye week. By the way, solid bye week at week 10. You get a nice sort of mid-season rest. After that, though, the season does get a little bit more difficult, so they really need to, pull off a couple upsets here. After the bye week in week 11 is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I am going to give the Steelers the win here. I know it's after a bye week, so you get a bit more time, but I don't think it really matters against divisional opponents. I think Pittsburgh will be competitive next year with both their offense and defense. I think they could give Cincinnati some problems, so I'm going to have them split versus Pittsburgh. I think the Bengals will win against the Patriots. While I think the Patriots are a good team, I still think they have a couple fundamental flaws that they have to get sorted out, and I just don't quite yet want to give my full heart and confidence into Drake May quite yet, though I definitely think he's heading in the right direction. Then you have a 3-week matchup that is just brutal. You have Baltimore, then Buffalo, and Baltimore again. Unfortunately, I am going to have them losing all 3 of these games because I just think that those teams right now are better rosters. But fortunately for them, they have a pretty relaxing end of schedule. Miami, Arizona is going to be a tough game. I think they'll be really good next year. But then Cleveland, I will give the win to Cincinnati in all 3 of those games. So if I'm crunching my numbers correctly, that means I am going to predict them to have a 10-7 record in the 2025 season. In terms of what their floor is, I do think their floor is relatively low. I think their floor is somewhere between 6 to 8 wins next year. I'm going to probably say at the lowest 7, but 6 is definitely possible with this kind of, relatively difficult schedule. In terms of their ceiling, if they're able to be competitive with Baltimore and win one of those games, maybe they upset a few teams here and there. I do think 12 to 11 wins is their ceiling. So overall, this is a solid team I think can make the playoffs. I just think they're a little bit limited with what they can do come playoff time because I just don't believe in this defense. What I will say is this, though. Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, and T. Higgins. That trio right there can win you a lot of games and could potentially be the difference between you winning a title or not. If those guys can stay healthy, I think all bets are off. But for now, I'm predicting 10-7, and I'm going to stand by that. But you let me know in the comment section below how many wins is Cincinnati winning in 2025. And I love you guys. Peace.